Final Fantasy 16 is one of the top 5 most anticipated games to come out this year. The others being Hogwarts Legacy, Legend of Zelda, Starfield, and Spider-Man 2. 3 out of the 5 have already been released, and each have been a huge success. It's been more than a week now, and the hype hasn't died down yet for Final Fantasy 16. It's currently sold more than 3 million copies so far and continues to rise. It's been critically acclaimed and well received, getting 90% ratings across the board, despite its new gameplay style. With that being said, how do I feel about the game? Well, I'm just going to get straight to the point. I bloody love this game. Before the game even came out, I was praying that Square Enix will release a demo, and long behold, they did, just a week before release. Final Fantasy 16, Lies of P, Street Fighter 6, and other games have shown why demos should still be a regular thing like it used to be, and not so rare now. This is probably the first demo that I've ever played that has made me so emotional. Like, I don't even play the opening to the game anymore. I just skip it. I just skip straight to the present time because it is so freaking depressing. Final Fantasy 16 tells the story of Clive Rosfield as he journeys on a quest for vengeance after a faithful knight took away everything he cared about. But during his journey, he gets pulled into a much deeper plot that's been in the works for centuries. To sum things up, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, then you will love this story, because it has everything it has to offer, except for floppy wieners and extreme gore. Clive might be one of my favorite Final Fantasy protagonists since Cloud and Lord Noctis. Like, he knows his role and he doesn't back down from it. Now, excluding the main character, the side characters are fantastic as well, just like every other Final Fantasy game. But we all know the best character is Torgal, right? He's so important that you get to pet him whenever you want to, just to show how good of a boy he is. And not to mention, he has his own plushie, so hey, just putting it out there. Now, this might be my own opinion, but I feel like Barnabas should have been the main villain instead of Ultima. Barnabas felt like Madara in the Fourth Great Ninja War. Like, every time he pulled up, he was a straight menace, testing Clive to see if he was worthy of the final boss. Which makes sense because he was the most devoted of the Dominants. Now, Ultima was a good villain, don't get me wrong, but he was basically the Kaguya of this game. Only difference is he was built up compared to Kaguya. Whenever Barnabas would pull up, I would legit say, oh shit. There's literally a moment in the game where that happens. After finishing the story, I think they did a great job. It had great characters, good villains, good story, the whole 9 yards. I clocked in over 100 hours before completing the game. That included the main story, the side quests, the hunting board, and the Chronolit trials. Graphically, this is probably the second best looking Final Fantasy game that I've played. The Final Fantasy VII Remake still has the edge over all of the Final Fantasy games, past, present, and future, because that game is freaking gorgeous. Like, whether you're playing on graphic mode or performance mode, you can't even tell the difference. Like, that's how beautiful the game is. Next, now that that's out of the way, next I'll be talking about the things I liked and disliked about the game. One of the main things I loved about Final Fantasy 16 is the change of combat style. Since the beginning of time, Final Fantasy has always been a turn-based game, but recently they've decided to switch things up. They debuted this change in Final Fantasy 15, if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments, where they introduced real-time combat for the first time. Though the game wasn't highly received, that was one of the features that I liked about it besides the fishing in the game. Then in 2020, Final Fantasy VII Remake came out and they polished the real-time combat and decimated all over Final Fantasy XV's combat. But they still gave players the choice between real-time and turn-based. And then last year, in Strangers of Paradise, Square Enix borrowed Nioh's combat, showing that they're not afraid to diversify their portfolio. After the success of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Square Enix went balls deep and hired the combat director from Devil May Cry 5, Ryota Suzuki, for their next game. You'd think people would be happy about this, but some people weren't. This was probably the hugest controversy with the game, which is stupid to me because how can you be mad when you got one of the guys that helped create one of the best action games that came out in 2019 to oversee the game? Now, I love this change because I love hack and slash games. It's probably my second favorite genre of games besides horror and RPG. So a hack and slash RPG was basically the best tongue twister. So a hack and slash RPG was basically a blessing from the gods. This game is more than just mashing the square button like people on the internet would tell you. Now you can do that, but you'll just be looking horrible and not enjoying the game.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would. But I legally can't.
Hey, that's pretty good.
If you want to pull off sexy combos like in most hack and slash games, you really have to pick the right abilities and set. Speaking of abilities, I love that you can diversify your ability settings, but that's only if you master the skill. You can mix fire and ice, or fire and light, or my personal favorite, fire and stone. Can you tell how much I love the fire icon? Now, the one thing I didn't like about the combat was that you don't have an air launch move like you do in most typical hack and slash games. Now, I know you can use Torgal to launch enemies in the air or use an ability to do it, but sometimes you don't want to do either and just want to launch the enemy in the air yourself. But unfortunately, you can't do that. That's just a tiny dislike I don't like about the combat. I really hope that Square Enix keeps this combat style around because I think Final Fantasy works really well in this type of format, and if people don't really like it, then they aren't really fans of this franchise. Story and gameplay are the two key factors in gaming, and Final Fantasy XVI killed it in both categories. The second thing I love about this game is the boss battles, or better known as icon battles. This right here is the key part of the game. This is like every little kid's dream. Seeing two giant monsters battle it out is a thing of beauty. It's like the Godzilla game you've dreamed of. You know how in most video games there's always a boss that stands out from the rest? But in Final Fantasy XVI, they took that saying and completely changed what we know. Every single boss battle in this game literally surpasses the next one, and I'm not even exaggerating on that. You can go from thinking there's no way they can top this boss battle, and then they do it. It felt like I was watching a non-stop anime fight. But if I had to pick a personal favorite, it would have to be the Bahamut fight. You want to talk about an anime fight? That was a motherfreaking anime fight. Epic pull-up game, check. Epic soundtrack, check. Epic fight, check. Just epic all around. But I gotta give props to the Titan fight because that felt like an Attack on Titan episode, and it felt like I was fighting the Founder Titan. If you know, you know. After every boss battle, I was screaming Game of the Year. There's literally a moment in the game where I was literally screaming Game of the Year. Like, there's no way no game is beating this. If you know what boss battle I'm talking about, put it in the comment section. And it's not the Bahamut fight or the Titan fight. It was before that. Just want to put that out there. The boss battles in this game were so epic that they were causing people's PlayStation 5s to overheat. Which is funny because the main character's ability is fire. So I guess you can say it did its job. I can't relate though, but hey. This and all of the Soul games have set a new bar in terms of how boss battles are supposed to be and how each one is supposed to surpass the next one. I'm sure there's other games that have set that bar as well. Those two are just the ones that come to mind right now. The last thing I like about Final Fantasy XVI is that this is another Final Fantasy game that newcomers can play. Final Fantasy has been around since 1987 and will continue to be around forever. But replaying all of those games seems like a chore because of availability, and plus, no one wants to do that anyway. Now, even though all the games aren't connected, except for some, they all share the same lore. My first ever Final Fantasy game was Final Fantasy 15, and as soon as you load up the game, it says that this game was made for newcomers and OG fans of the series. But let's be real, it was really more focused towards the newcomers. Final Fantasy VII Remake is another game that was perfect for newcomers, and is probably the most popular one out of the entire series. If it wasn't, then another Final Fantasy game would have gotten the remake first. If you've never played a Final Fantasy game, or if you're a fan of action games and hack and slash games, then this is the perfect game for you. Now it's time to talk about the things I dislike about the game. Now this one is a hit or miss, but it's the long dialogue. The reason I say this is because it reminded me of Yakuza 0, which is probably the only Yakuza game where I didn't pay attention to the dialogue on my first playthrough, but I did later on. Now, I'm not talking about the cutscenes, I'm talking about the parts where you can just press the skip button while they're talking. I found myself checking my phone during certain dialogue moments. It's not because I was bored or anything, it was more like I'm ready to get back into the action type of feeling, you know? Yeah, I know what I'm saying is crazy because Final Fantasy is a story-driven franchise, and here I am talking about how much I don't like to hear them talk. Which is why I said it's a hit or miss. The next thing I don't like is the amount of XP and ability points you get. This is a real nitpick for me because at first it's perfectly fine. You're not at a high level and you're still learning the game. But for those out there that are completionists and might like to do the side quests before tackling the main missions, this is a pain. You can be fighting a level 50 boss when you're level 40 and they will reward you with a small amount of XP and somewhat decent ability points. But boy, will they give you a shit ton of currency though. I think that's where they spent most of their resources on. Speaking of which, currency is useless once you've unlocked everything, or at least you've bought what you're looking for. I think they should have equally distributed the currency, ability points, and XP the higher you got. It's like the game is telling you to hurry up and play New Game Plus in order to get the points you want. Hence why I said earlier that in my New Game Plus playthrough, it felt like I was getting more than what I did in the first playthrough. The next thing I don't like about Final Fantasy 16 was the difficulty. Now, I didn't really notice this until I got on social media and noticed people talking about the difficulty and how the creators of the game already talked about the difficulty before the game even came out. I was just casually breezing through the game, beating opponents higher than me without a care in the world. Like, I get why Square Enix decided to go this route because not all of y'all, but some of y'all in the community be complaining about the difficulty of something, and then when it's not difficult, you complain about that too. You see how people bitch and complain about the Souls games and saying how there should be an easy mode and stuff. So if I had to guess, that means this game might have been a little bit more difficult before they decided to make this change, kind of like in every other Final Fantasy game. At least in the remake, when you play it on normal mode, you still get a little bit of a challenge. That's kind of what they should have did, but they didn't. But if that was the case, that they decided to change the difficulty and it was harder and it was going to be a little bit more challenging before, then they should have just stood their ground and made it more challenging. Like, the only real challenge I had in my first playthrough was Svarog. I'm gonna just say Sarog or Varog, the giant dragon, the level 50 dragon. But he was only challenging because I was a level 37 and he was a level 50. So I set myself up for failure with that one. Now, during my New Game Plus playthrough, it has been a tad bit more challenging. Not a lot, not a huge significant jump, but it's a tad bit more difficulty. It mostly just depends on if you've mastered the dodging. If you mastered the precision dodging, then New Game Plus is not really going to be that hard for you. It should be another breeze, but the only thing is you can still get caught lacking. That's the only thing. If you master dodging, then you're good. If you master parrying, then this game basically is easy mode for you, because if you master parrying, you're practically a god at the game, and I'm not even capping on that. But I haven't fought Barnabas yet, so maybe he'll change my opinion in terms of difficulty. Now, this last one is probably the most annoying one to me because I didn't know until it was too late, and that is the sword Ragnarok. Now, for those that haven't gotten this blade yet, do not sell it once you get a better sword. You need it in order to create the Götter Damarung. You need to create that. You needed to create that sword. You need it to create the sword that gets you a trophy. You cannot forge it, and you cannot sell it. You cannot forge it, and if you sell it, you cannot buy it back. This game really should have warned you about this because the side quest that gives you the sword is towards the end of the game, so that means you'll have to play towards the end of the game all over again. Square Enix needs to add a bug that fixes this problem because it's really frustrating having to worry about that during your platinum run. Now, just to give a quick run through, I like the combat, I like the boss battles, and that is perfect for newcomers of the franchise. What I don't like is the long dialogue, the balance in XP, the difficulty, and the Ragnarok sword. Now, if you've been doing count, that's 7 total, but everyone knows an even number is a better number, so just to make it an even number, another thing I love about Final Fantasy 16 is petting Torgal whenever I felt like it. With that being said, do I think that it will win Game of the Year? It's going to be a close one, to be honest, but with all the controversy surrounding it, I wouldn't be surprised if it does win. I mean, look at The Last of Us Part 2. The only reason that game won was because of all the controversy and Abby getting back shots. But we still got Spider-Man 2 coming up, so maybe that one might sneak up and take the lead. I'm not even mentioning Starfield because I know for a fact that that game is not winning. I'm not even hating on it. I hope Bethesda succeeds, but I just don't see the appeal. It's literally Xbox's version of No Man's Sky. Overall, this is a fantastic game that everyone who has a PS5 should definitely play. I'll give it a 8.5, 9 out of 10. If you played the game, let me know in the comments, and let me know who you think will win Game of the Year, because it's going to be a close one. Thank you for watching the video. Leave a like, comment, share, subscribe. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.